God, you're clapping. It's so nice. It's like you were paid to do it. Welcome to Build Weekend Watch, the only show that actually condones parents paying, cheating, and/or bribing people to get their kids into school, as long as it exposes the long con that is higher education in this country. Alongside me today, I have HuffPost entertainment reporter Cole Delbyck and staff writer for Vulture, Jackson McHenry. Guys, thanks so much for being here. We three, excuse me. Okay, we three are going to be talking about the star-studded Netflix action film Triple Frontier, the upcoming revenge-filled season of Showtime's Billions, The Good Fight and its new Trump-bashing season, the final season of Catastrophe on Amazon Prime, Aidy Bryant's Shrill on Hulu, the second half of Arrested Development's 5th season, Idris Elba as a struggling DJ in Netflix's new Turn Up Charlie, and the return of the Fab Five in new episodes of Queer Eye. Oh my God, this show is going to be like 6 hours long. But first, let's start with...
You've been shot 5 times for your country, and you can't even afford to send your kids to college. If we had accomplished half the things that we've accomplished in any other profession, we'd be set for life.
I'm your masters of war.
The question is, do we finally get to use our skills for our own benefit? We're gonna get Gabriel Martin Larea. He's got over $75 million in cash.
If we're not gone forever after you make your move, we are dead.
Ooh, for those of you who don't know, that is Triple Frontier, starring 4 really good-looking guys that did push-ups and ran laps before every take, and Ben Affleck. I wanted this movie to be so much better than it was. It's a very simple idea. It's got this great cast. It's got a director who's done some interesting stuff, but it's fairly limp. It's not boring, but it just never amounts to exactly what you hope it will be.
Yeah, I agree with limp, but this movie was on my radar for such a long time because of those photos of Ben Affleck emerging from the waters with that horrible back tattoo from the set. So
is that from the set of it?
It was from the set.
But we never really get
We don't get a shirtless Affleck shot, so I don't know. I think they were like frolicking on the beach together. I think they really bonded during filming or something. So I was like, okay.
Do you feel none of that on in any frame of the movie? Yeah.
I watched the movie about the making of Triple Frontier, you know, more so than Triple
Frontier. 100%. I would watch that. Just each one of them like doing push-ups and be like, can I get a coffee? Like another bar, please.
EA, please, hello.
There's something, the director of this film, AC Shandor, right? JC Shandor, excuse me. Why am I hosting this? JC Shandor directed All Is Lost with Robert Redford, A Most Violent Year with Oscar Isaac, and Margin Call, his first movie about a group of finance people over the course of one night figuring out basically how to hedge all their losses. And it was very much about the financial meltdown in 2008. Still, maybe his best movie, is a very careful, polished director, and it makes so many of these scenes just uninteresting to watch and unentertaining because you want something to break. At one point, I think I said to the screen in the middle of doing this, "What's up, guys? How's it going back there?" I said, someone throw the camera at the wall. Someone do something to sort of just jolt this movie, give it a little life, because it feels extremely lifeless for an action movie.
And with a cast like that, you kind of want it to be camp or fun or at least have a sense of humor. And like A Most Violent Year at least had Jessica Chastain like chewing the scenery and like throwing out her cigarette and like having fun with it. Or something like this, you're like, why is this not super fun? Like, why is this like not a romp?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be a romp. Have more action or like have a bit more conflict between the characters. But there just seemed to be very little conflict, and I found the look of it. I know you really liked the look of the movie. I found it to be fairly bland.
Yeah, I think my expectations were a bit lower because I just sort of wanted, it's like this is not my genre at all, but then I sort of wanted these group of guys marching through the jungle, shooting people. Like, it gave me that. It gave me this like B-level movie satisfaction. And I was saying I kind of like Netflix in this space. I know there's conversation of Netflix deserving awards recognition and whatever, and this movie is certainly not going to be that. But I like when they do sort of the more B-movie fare that's sort of like on in the background. You don't have to be super glued in. And I do think it's executed well. There are some beautiful shots of like the South American countryside, and some of the action I do feel is well executed, but I did want a little bit of more, and I wanted some more like self-awareness. Like, this is Ben Affleck. come on. The movie starts with him trying to sell this house in khakis and then failing to sell the house, and it is so depressing. I never.
And then from there being like, I guess I'll be a mercenary. Right?
You know.
But that's the thing. It's like I didn't go into this expecting anything. Like I didn't go into this movie thinking to myself like, okay, with a cast like this and this director, this is going to be something special. It wouldn't be straight to Netflix if it was. They would have put it into theaters. Like
I think
we've
it did
seen
go
that.
in theaters before.
Maybe it went to Landmark,
It was like
the
1
one
week,
that Netflix, the one that Netflix owns and pretty much dumps everything into. But by and large, with the exception of something like maybe Buster Scruggs or a couple other movies, if it goes straight to Netflix without like a decent release, it's a pretty clear sign. But I still thought it's going to have a huge budget. They're going to do something. And even while I was watching it, I just kept thinking, God, there are so many elements here. There are so many pieces that if just put together right, this could be a more fun movie. And it just never does that. You know, I even just wanted like B-action movie background stuff. Yeah. Anyway, that's Triple Frontier. Should we move on?
Let's.
Because it's not really worth talking about more, I don't think.
Should be more fun. I agree.
Coming back this Sunday is Showtime's shady corporate drama, Billions. And I have to admit that as great as Paul Giamatti and Damian Lewis are, the show is no Succession. I like Billions. Who wrote that? Take a look at season 4.
You know what you're doing, and I'm here to tell you don't. I am running. And when I win, I'm gonna roll over you like it's Tiananmen Square.
Even when one keeps things mathematical, a satisfying solution isn't always available.
Be sure you don't forget about me.
Take them out.
This I do.
I am a fan of Billions. It's a show that I think I kept on the back burner for a while that I wasn't sure if I was going to like because it just seemed like it was for an older folk, maybe not necessarily for me, but it's another show that just knows how to vamp it up and how to have a good time with its characters. I mean, Paul Giamatti and his wife, played by Maggie Siff, are into S&M together. It's insane. Like, Damian Lewis loves metal and is talking about metal all the time. The show is like filled to the brim with very esoteric references that the writers like, and David Costabile is basically told to go as far as he wants to go in every scene, and he is ridiculously campy. Billions is a really great show.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched Billions mostly because I committed to Succession, and I was like, I don't know how many super rich New Yorkers I can keep in my life, aside from reading everything about the college admission scandal. But I think I really appreciate that it seems to employ the entire New York theater scene, and they all seem to be having a great time. And it seems to sort of interact with the investment banking world in a fascinating way. I've read people that have written in to complain that the private jets aren't expensive enough, that they spend $2,000 on all of the fleeces for the investment bankers, that there's a sense of like parodying this world, but also like paying very close attention to detail, which pays off, I think.
I think I wouldn't necessarily say that it loves this world. It's not as judgmental of the world as I would be. I'm very judgmental of rich people. If you are rich and you are watching, I'm coming for you. But this show, it treats them with enough respect, but it is fascinating. It is fascinated with what it means to be so wealthy, you could basically own a country. And these guys kind of do. I mean, as we see in the last season, Paul Giamatti has basically been let go by the U.S. government. He's kind of hustling to make it on his own, and he is potentially working with Damian Lewis, who has been his arch nemesis from the past 3 seasons. And we see Taylor, who was Damian Lewis's character's sort of protege, who was running Axe Capital, is now gone out on her own from last season. And there's a whole plot line in the first episode of this where they get involved with the... I want to say it's the Saudis, but I'm not exactly sure. And there's a kind of Khashoggi narrative, like almost story that plays itself out in the consulate of that country. It's a really, I think Billions is a really, really fun show and kind of underrated for, I think, people our age because we think it's for our parents.
Yeah, I was saying, like, I do not watch Billions, to be totally honest, but my parents do, so I am championing it just for them. I want it to be successful so they can have something to watch on, like, a Sunday night.
I will tell you something. If you watched it, you would like it.
No, I'm sure. I'm just
because it is a show that, like, I was lazy about tuning into, and when I tuned into it, I was kind of like, oh, this is its own weird world that these writers have created that isn't necessarily the real world at all.
I'm here for Kate Dillon, too, who's, like, fucking up gender norms in the best way.
100%. She's, they are Taylor, who is Axe's former protege that's now going against him. Let's move on to The Good Fight. Christine Baranski returned as Diane Lockhart for season 3. Let's take a look.
I'm looking for people who are ready to take the fight to Trump.
Get out of here. No, don't wash your hands, tall lady. Get out.
You are a funny bird.
Squawk.
Oh!
I'm guessing that you haven't been a nanny for very long?
I'm not a nanny. I found him at Whole Foods. Okay, strange baby. Time to sell you on eBay.
Woo! I'm ready to fight. The resistance starts now.
The Good Fight rules.
So fucking show. It's so incredible. I think it really leveled up in its second season where they sort of had the spur of Trump being elected and they sort of committed to a ton of weirdness. And in
so much weirdness.
So much weirdness. And in the third season, they're even weirder. They have these like little musical animated shorts in the middle of each episode.
NDA short in the first episode.
There's one about NDAs. There's one about Roy Cohn. There's one about all sorts of things. And they just have a sense of humor about like, this is all catastrophic for our democracy and terrible. And it's sort of like, how do you work for the rule of law within it? And like, how do you try to do good things? And it remains firing on all cylinders, really.
Yeah, it's a show that is firing on all cylinders, and none of those cylinders are you can see them coming in a lot of ways. Like that NDA animated sequence came out of nowhere for me. I was like, oh, we're suddenly doing a musical number, and it actually worked, unlike the deleted scene from Vice, which did not work at all.
God,
Even as
How
a deleted
dare you
scene.
mention that on this stage? Yeah, I'm still recovering from Diane like microdosing her way through season 2. Because I was like, I couldn't even imagine that plot line if I tried. But what I love about The Good Fight is that it is so like in step with the news, and it has its sort of pulse on current events, but then doesn't go for the easy shot with them. It always sort of adds a new layer, a different angle at them that you walk away feeling like, oh, these people actually gave a shit about this issue.
Or when it does go for the easy shot, I feel like as a viewer, you feel like, of course, like how could you not take that easy shot? That's so much fun. Like Gary, is it Gary? What's the actor's name who plays Diane's boyfriend?
Gary Cole.
Gary Cole, thank you. Sometimes I forget if that's his real name or if that was his name in Office Space.
Yes.
Gary Cole, who there's a whole thing where he goes hunting now with Eric and Donald Trump Jr. and she's very upset with him over it. And now, I think in idea I would hear that and be like, come on, let's kind of. But when you're watching the show, it's a cheap shot that works so well for some reason.
And it's something. I mean, his character is supposed to be sort of a moderate Republican, but it becomes such a rift in their relationship that like he would associate with Eric and Dawn, and you get Christine Baranski, condescending and being like Eric and Dawn. And it's great. And they also bring in Michael Sheen this season, who is so incredibly funny, as he basically plays a Roger Stone-esque Roy Cohn lawyer who's like grumbling all the time and like comes up with all sorts of crazy schemes, and it's just like they like let Michael Sheen run loose. He has a giant beard. It's like he was feral, and they were like, just put a camera on him and see what happens.
I love the way that the show looks. The show, each episode looks like a movie, and they shoot it in these sort of panoramic wide scope lenses, and it's really beautiful, and it somehow makes all of the topicality and timeliness of the show a bit more timeless. Like as much as they are talking about things that are very directly in the news right now, the way that it's shot feels like an old, beautiful movie. Yeah, like CBS All Access, like it feels like they gave them a lot of money to go do whatever they wanted.
It is so frustrating that the show is on CBS All Access that it's so hard for me to explain to people like how you watch the show and like how you get a subscription. It's like you can watch this and Star Trek, and those fan bases do not interact. But there's something about it that it feels like an old-fashioned musical somehow too, and the characters do start singing. There's like a little bit of Audra McDonald singing, and she's like one of the greatest voices of all time, and you're just like, oh my God, and somehow it still works for the characters, and because it's just like all these people are losing their minds, why wouldn't this happen?
I think there needs to be more CBS All Accesses where good creatives feel like the executives are not watching them, and they clearly like want the executives to watch them, like they want someone to step in and be like, you guys can't do this, because that's what it feels like The Good Fight is kind of doing here.
I'm sort of curious to see what they do with Maya Rendell's character, because I always felt that she had this sort of storyline that was a bit running in a different way than sort of the daily law practice stuff. And I think they lost her a bit in the second season, and that story was never as compelling, although Bernadette Peters on screen, I will never say no to. So I hope that they integrate her better this year.
And they do make a conscious effort, it feels like, to do that. They have Rose Leslie's character come in and like be told by the other characters that she needs to stop whispering and like stand up for herself, and then she's the one who gets paired with Michael Sheen. And you feel like they were just like, oh, we're going to torture Rose Leslie by making her try to hold her own in scenes with Michael Sheen. And it's amazing to watch, and you're sort of like, okay, hopefully this kicks her into a little bit more kind of fuller gear with the rest of the cast.
Okay, moving on to our next show, written by and starring Rob Delaney and Sharon Horgan. It's the Amazon Prime series Catastrophe, which follows Rob and Sharon as they figure out marriage, parenthood, in-laws, alcoholism, all that adult shit we're always figuring out. Let's take a look.
We've been invited to a dinner with the big Brabant boss and his wife.
Oh, God, really? I mean, should I be chatty like Michelle Obama, or should I be more like Jackie Kennedy? You know, like, don't say much, but when I do say something, really make it count. Like slag off the Queen.
I think I'm gonna say you can't make it. I feel like having kids is like strapping yourself to a Formula One race car, you know? Boom, your life is over. But not in a bad way.
I love this show. I think it's so great. They are so smart at pulling comedy from very subtle situations and knowing how to ramp up the stakes of the season in very small ways, so that at the end, a sort of very big, a big moment can happen, like a car accident or alcoholism, and it cannot feel like the show is just trying to throw stakes out of nowhere. It feels very believable and realistic.
Yeah. And I think it's really impressive as sort of a high-wire act to track along that they do all of these terrible things do happen to these people in their lives, and they maintain a real sense of humor about it. And the show, even as it's sort of gone on, this is a kind of a goodbye season for it, it doesn't sort of become too sentimental or too bitter. There's a sense that they're just sort of trying to toe how do we get these characters to a place where you sort of feel comfortable saying goodbye to them, but also they remain true to who they are.
Was the ending ambiguous for you?
Ambiguous in what sense?
Okay, so I don't think it was.
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, they were here and we talked about the ending. And according to people in the UK, they believed that them going out into the water meant that goodbye. I, on the other hand, just assumed that they were going to swim back and get in the car with the kids and drive away. And it was, for the most part, a happy ending to the point where, like, you know, life goes on, and like they'll have another fight, but the show is over, but they recognize how much they love each other. But apparently lots and lots and lots of people think that the characters died.
The British viewing audience is very grim and like very afraid of the ocean. I mean, I got the sense of like, because it's sort of, they go out into an area where there's a riptide warning sign and they're swimming, and I was sort of like, oh, well, that's just them sort of cheekily ignoring the rules and like, being like, oh, we're still people who risk things. And
him also being like, I want to go swim with my wife while she's near the riptide, so in case something happens, I can pull her in.
Yeah.
But I did not take it. I took it as a very happy ending.
Interesting. Because I was sort of still on the note of course, the series had to say goodbye to Carrie Fisher in a way, and they do it in a very sort of touching, still funny, honest to her sort of personality way. And I was like, oh, this is just continuing the characters of like, they'll still keep struggling along, and this will be fine. But I guess I'm not as afraid of riptides as the rest of England.
Yeah, I was talking to them about it, and they're like, "That's funny that you didn't sense that." And I was like, "In no way, when the credits rolled, did I think maybe they died." Like, when the credits rolled, I was like, "What a nice show! I love those people."
Gosh, yeah, I didn't think it was like the full like Blackadder end where it's like, yes, they go into the trenches. So I don't know.
Yeah, this show really wasn't on my radar until I started following Rob Delaney on Twitter, and I've just been so moved and impressed by him being so open about his struggle with sobriety and then the death of his child, which is so heartbreaking. And it really seems like he brings that sort of sensitivity and sensibility to the show.
Yeah, the show, even when it goes for the big laugh, it never feels like it's pulling something out of nowhere. You know, it never feels like it's like, oh, we have to do something huge now to to make this work. It's always very subtle and very smart, I think. At least with Rob and Sharon. I think some of the peripheral characters can get a little crazier.
Yeah, I think it's for like Fergal and stuff where I'm like, okay, I get the joke, and like it sort of runs into it, but the two of them are so funny together. I sort of like finished it and I was like, well, now I don't have any more of Rob and Sharon like bickering. Like, what am I gonna do?
She's so great.
And she has such incredible timing and like sensibility of like bitterness. There's a great scene where they land hand and someone's like, you're not paying attention to your child. And she's like, I will get my child. Like, let me live my life, which is a wonderful kind of sensibility to see those kind of parent characters do.
Let's move on. Out today is the new comedy Shrill, executive produced by Elizabeth Banks and Lorne Michaels, which basically just means he allowed Adie Bryant to do it, I think. It stars SNL alum Adie Bryant. She plays the lead role of Annie, a woman who starts to unapologetically fight for what she deserves. Check out the trailer.
I wrote an article and 19,000 people clicked on it. 19,000 people clicked her. Not clicked me, but...
All right, Annie!
I feel very powerful right now. I've been letting people dismiss me or say to me my entire life. At this point, I just feel like
Yeah.
and you too.
Yeah. I mean...
I like the show a lot. Adie Bryant's such a treasure. She's just an absolute treasure.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of like she finally gets to have a show of her own, and she takes a lot of the characters based on Lindy West. It's Annie Easton, which is sort of fun. But it gives her a sense of like she's playing a character who slowly is realizing how mad she is at the world, which is a nice sort of progression where she's not someone who comes in and is like sort of like a fat best friend character that you've seen in a lot of things before, where it's like, and she's sort of slowly coming to terms with it. It's a kind of a remarkably subtle performance, really.
Yeah, I've been waiting so long for like Adie Bryant to have her project as other SNL stars have really like broken out of that show. But what really struck me about this show is that, of course, it is very funny and it has her sort of comic timing, but I was most sort of impressed by the heart of the show, and her dramatic scenes I felt to be the most effective, especially you see a little bit there when she's confronting her sort of on again, off again hookup and having the really difficult conversation that feels so long overdue, and she really like rises to the challenge, and I want to see actually more dramatic work from her.
Yeah, there's a plot line in the first episode involving her boyfriend, but it's not with him, and she has a conversation at a thrift shop with her roommate that is incredibly well acted and a really beautiful scene. My one reservation with the show, and I know it's because of my privilege, and I'm sorry, but I'm just going to say it anyway, is that sometimes I find it to be a little preachy, and I find sometimes the moments where she is telling somebody exactly how angry she is and exactly how she feels to be moments that I'm never going to want to go back to as a viewer. They feel very on the nose, and it's something that the show has to do. Like, if it's not on the nose, the show's almost not going to work. But those things I always kind of cringe, and I'm always kind of like, couldn't we have written our way around this a little bit more? But I feel like that's also the intention of the show as well.
I think what helps with those moments for me, though, is that the sort of scenes around her, the characters around her, don't let her get away with everything. Like, they have their own lives. She has a roommate, people at work. John Cameron Mitchell plays her boss. And I feel like there's this well-textured world around her, so it doesn't seem so sort of like navel-gazy or so much about her own personal struggle, although there is that, but there are some other elements that sort of pull you out of this isn't just about...
I've only seen her be right so far, you know what I mean? And that's why, to me, John Cameron Mitchell, in a way, is the more interesting character on the show, or more entertaining, at the very least, because he's wrong and right a lot of the times, and he's confrontational. She is confrontational and only right, so far for me. And I think, there's moments where she's delivering a speech to her roommate or something. It is a speech, and the roommate will go, I wish I had thought that when I was a child. Me too. I love that too. And it's like, give her a real flaw. Give her something that makes her, at the very least, contrary to what we think she is in some way.
I mean, you brought up John Cameron Mitchell. There's also a sort of sense where he's playing basically a version of Dan Savage, where like Dan Savage edited The Seattle Stranger, and then the character on the show edits a Portland alt sort of newspaper, and they're replaying a lot of the conversations that Lindy West and Dan Savage had when she was working at The Seattle Stranger and publishing the same articles the character's playing. And he does a sort of parody of this guy who's like really fat phobic and sort of afraid of all these things very well. But there is also, I think, a sense that like the show exists a little bit out of time. All the characters have iPhones, but those were all stories that she published in the sort of early 2000s. And that was a little frustrating for me because I was like, I'm not entirely sure when these conversations are happening or where exactly the world is set. So there's things where I'm like, as the show goes on, I hope it kind of refines that and tightens it, but there's a lot of good elements in there.
It's hard to have the same conversations the show is having, but in this time period now, in a way, even though it's still relevant to right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure lots of people are still going through having those same problems, but there's something that I think most people don't talk about it the same way. You know, it's much more hidden, and the show almost wouldn't work if you were having these same conversations the way that I think most people are now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it was sort of an interesting choice they had to make in the writer's room. But like, for instance, even in that trailer, there's mentions of all the people commenting on her posts. And you're like, well, if this is set now, it would all be people on Twitter. And that's like a slightly different dynamic where it would be like people coming for her in a different way. And you're sort of like, if it's not specific, it's harder to sort of get that kind of traction away from kind of character-based opinion rather than sort of, as you were saying, kind of, this is my general thoughts on the world.
I think something I did appreciate that did feel very timely, though, is her character is very much like a sexual being. She has sex, she makes mistakes. I think there's a really delicately handled abortion storyline early on, and I just am so glad there's a space that there's a character who looks like Aidy Bryant who's allowed to sort of live fully and embrace like all different parts of life, even if at points it is a bit like, you know, ham-fisted or preachy. I think those moments where I'm like, I have not seen a character that looks like this do this on TV before really sort of win out for me in the end.
I agree. I also will say, there's a part of me that gets over that quite quickly. You know, it's like, great, you got a show. Like, you can tell these stories. That is amazing. I am so excited for that. Also, I'm excited because she is just objectively a hilarious, amazing talent. But like, once that is over with, I'm not gonna praise 10 episodes of a show because you did something that nobody's really done before.
Well, it cannot be one note. And I think I've seen 3. It does sort of start to push beyond that. But I agree. Hopefully, it commits to more than just that.
Yeah, I do like it.
Ricky
like
hates
devil's advocate. I love you, Aidy Bryant. Okay, let's move on. Remember that show, Arrested Development? Well, it's back for the second part of season 5. Let's look at the trailer.
Are you in love with this guy?
We're having fun.
I'm going to my fort! Fake block, it's real!
Don't tell Michael.
I should have led with this.
I'm listening. It will come out in the most unexpected balls.
Well, there's always money in the banana stand.
Right.
Where's that from? Is that from something?
Oh, that moment made me so mad. And I'm sorry, some of you laugh. Good for you. I'm glad that you can still enjoy the same jokes for 5 seasons over the course of what feels like 15 years. Arrested Development, to me, I loved the first season when it came out. It was nothing like anything I had ever seen. I hadn't seen anything like that before. Same with the second. And then the third, which was on Fox, I remember watching it and thinking to myself, this show is so far up its own ass. I cannot watch this anymore. Everything is just a joke about a previous joke about a previous joke. And I get that people like that, but I don't find that entertaining. And then everything on Netflix has been the same, but without being able to get the cast in the same room, which was the only thing that was ever really great about the show, was watching all these incredible performers, Jeffrey Tambor included, perform together and be hilarious, but now they can't do that. So it's like, here is Jason Bateman alone talking to a wall. Here's Michael Cera alone talking to a scooter. Like, that's not the show. And then they're also just talking to a scooter, being like, remember the banana stand? So boring.
Yeah. And there's
Sorry, it's my Arrested Development rant.
No, and watching more of it, I think it's also incredibly disserved by being split up into 2 parts, where sort of the first half of the 5th season came out last year, and it was also coming out in the midst of all of the stuff about Jeffrey Tambor and that sort of catastrophic New York Times interview they all did, where Jessica Walters talked about sort of feeling left out of all of them. And
well, she was like, he yelled at me and hurt my feelings, and they were like, shut up.
They were just like,
stop
okay,
talking about this.
We all love each other. We're a family. Exactly. And so the sense that there was no time, they'd already shot all these episodes. So it's just like, here's more of the thing that you weren't really that happy with last year, that we're just serving you more of because we have this content. And you're just watching it and you're like, why? Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
That was the feeling that I had with the first part of this season, where I was just like, why?
Yeah.
I don't get this.
Yeah, it just feels very sad, honestly. Like, I used to be such a huge fan. I think maybe I had more tolerance for the inside jokey stuff. And I thought my appetite for, like, anything Arrested Development was insatiable. I was here, I was committed, watched the travesty that was season 4, and also the remix season 4, which was not better. But, you know, I just feel like there is some inherent joy that I get from watching these people do anything. They are very funny.
When they're in the room together, the show is incredible.
Jessica Walter can do no wrong, but it just feels tired and also so convoluted because it's expecting me to remember who went to jail, who was building the wall, who. I was like, I do not care. Just like be funny, you know? And then I was like, where's Portia de Rossi? So
that's the issue. There's so much of the show is spent doing exposition about what happened before and not doing new jokes. Just do new jokes. And that's why, again, it goes back to when all of the cast members, or at least like 4 of them, are in a room together, everything starts clicking because they stop doing exposition. They start telling a new story and messing around. Everything else just feels like, remember last time? Remember the time before that? Remember the time before the time or the other time than that? And you're like, stop.
And it's been, as you said, like it's been like what 15 years of it, and you're sort of like that was from that worked also in sort of like the nihilism of the early 2000s and this sense of like everything is wrong, and you're in this moment and you're just like all of these people are continuing to be terrible, all these characters like they don't really change at all, and you're just like, well, if the show isn't going to change, what is it going to offer me? Like, why do I keep coming back to it? I can easily just go watch the first 2 seasons and be like, this was funny. I don't need someone to like be like, hey, remember how that was funny? Let me just say that again.
Remember when this was funny?
Yeah.
Look at that. Remember the other thing that was funny? That?
I was like, yes, I do remember it was funny, but I'm not like laughing again. There's not a lot of surprise in it. And there are also sort of things where it's sort of like, there's a sort of running thread about Job, like maybe being gay that just sort of like feels like, I'm like, is this 2003 still? Like, I guess you want it to be, but I don't really want it to be 2003 anymore, so.
So tired, so tired.
All right, also released on Netflix today is Turn Up Charlie, the new comedy led by Idris Elba. Elba stars as a down-on-his-luck DJ who becomes a man nanny. Get it? Roll the trailer.
I'm sick of having strangers watch my kid.
Do you know how long on average it takes me to make a nanny quit?
We're like mates. Kids ain't my thing.
You feeling abandoned too?
Yeah.
If we're gonna collaborate, I want the truth.
My parents think that I'm a big music mogul.
I'm going to say something about this that I said about Julianne Moore last week with Gloria Bell, which was that I loved Gloria Bell. Don't give me that look. But my problem with Gloria Bell was like, in the first scene, she approaches a man and the man doesn't want to talk to her, as if Julianne Moore is not the most stunning woman in the room, any room she walks into. And the same thing kind of happens with Turn Up Charlie, where every scene Idris Elba is in, it's like, that's the boss. He is beautiful and massive. That is nobody's not going to listen to that man, and he's supposed to be down on his luck, and it's just like impossible to buy that that face would ever be down on their luck.
Sort of a lot of I'm like, Idris Elba, he's charming, like, and in this show he also has the added skill, like within the show he's supposed to be a good DJ, and he's trying to constantly, he ends up becoming a manny for these people who are in the music industry, and he's trying to get in and everything, but the sort of sense of like, well, yeah, he like is good at all of these things, why isn't this happening? And you're sort of watching the show and it's like, it's great that Idris Elba got a show about how Idris Elba is charming. Like, I agree. I don't know what else there is to say, but it's sort of like, fine.
It's like, I buy Idris Elba as an action star. I buy Idris Elba as that detective that he played for a while, right? Luther. Yeah. I buy him as Stringer Bell. Yeah. These are all like the boss. The guy that walks into the room and like figures out how to save everybody. I just don't buy him as a fumbling fuddy-duddy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here for like Idris Elba spreading his wings and like getting in, you know, doing something outside of like the brooding action star, but I feel like the point of this whole show is to like, prove that he can DJ. When everyone like looks at his Wikipedia page, you're like, what? Idris Elba's a DJ? You know? And then, and I hate to use this term, but
who can't DJ?
It does feel like a bit like sort of a vanity project in the sense of like, he's super charming. I don't know. it felt like, what is the point? And it pains me so much to say anything about a show that has bad about a show that has Piper Perabo in it, because I love her so much.
It's strange to have a vanity project that just turns into the concept of like the sitter.
Yeah, or like Transporter or something.
Yeah, it's like Kindergarten Cop or something. You're just like, oh, like I'm glad. It's sort of like I'm like, why is this not like a 90-minute thing that they would release in movies and a bunch of kids would go see and you'd watch it in elementary school and like years later look back and be like, what was this?
Also a babysitter. Sold. That's all that we got to say about this. Let's move on to the next one. It's really what we're here to talk about. It is the new episode of Queer Eye. Roll the trailer.
Jess came out when she was 16 years old.
This is our first lesbian. We're also doing our first duo. Ew, oh my God, I love a duo.
Let's do this.
Hey, we're here, guys.
Ask for help. You're not invincible.
Sometimes you just need a little support.
That's it.
You go out there and you find your chosen family.
I'm very happy to have Bobby back. Bobby is my favorite.
Is Bobby your favorite?
Bobby's
oh my gosh,
favorite.
why?
Bobby is my favorite because I think he does the most work,
yes.
and he doesn't get the most credit because he's not the biggest personality, and so people don't talk about him as much. And every time I watch the show, I'm more inspired by what he does, and everything else that everybody else does is kind of built around what he does, you know. And for some reason, everybody wants to talk about like Anthony, who's like, here's a spring roll. But what did you guys think? Did you watch any of the new season?
I've watched the first episode of it, and the first episode does have they have a woman who's their first lesbian who they work with, and it does have they have a sense of trying to connect with the people, and they do.
Wait, the first episode is the woman that is the
I think, or
the
maybe
first episode that I saw, which I thought was
like a hunter.
She's a hunter.
Oh well, I don't know.
She's married to a man, though. I don't know.
Well, I watched an episode somewhere. I'm not sure. Netflix like messed up all of my screeners this week, so I'm not sure exactly what I was doing. But I did watch an episode, and they engage with her in a way where it seems like they're trying to talk. They talk to her sort of about sexuality. She was adopted, and then her parents. Did not approve of her sexuality, and there's a sense of like trying to make a real emotional connection that worked very well for me. Though I do have to admit that once we're in the third season of this show, it feels like a lot of the sort of basic tricks and hacks that they use are feeling very samey, in the sense that you see the makeover and you're like, this looks like all of the other Queer Eye houses they've made over, or like, oh yes, you should do a French tuck, or like, yes, avocados are a nice ingredient to any meal. And like I'm a little bit like, I don't know, if there's a way to move the aesthetics forward, that would be more interesting to me.
No, you're right. It's like a tried and true formula at this point. But man, am I an easy target, because I swear every episode I'm like, it's not going to get me. It's not going to get me. And then she like turns around with her. I'm in tears.
Same.
And so here's the thing about Queer Eye. I think its heart is in the right place. I think it is a good show to be out there. I love how it connects different people. This season's set in Kansas City, Missouri, so it's a little bit different than the Atlanta, Georgia setting for the first two seasons. So it's a bit, I would say, less like political. They're not sort of confronting people with as different sort of views as they are. But so it is still good, but the sort of celebrity of each of the Fab Five has started to like chip away at my enjoyment, because I see another goddamn SpawnCon on one of their Instagram accounts. Like it's a bit too much, and you can tell that they're pretty full of themselves at this point. So I don't know. I struggle with that part.
Sorry, go ahead, Jackson.
Oh, I was just like, I feel like they should use the Avengers approach and just sort of slowly start to add in new members of the Fab Five and cycle them out. Like, because I think there's a sense of like, these people they're all very good at, they have their personas. You know what Anthony will say, you know what Bobby will build, but there's a sense of like, well, maybe there are other queer people who could come into the show or come out of the show and add different perspectives, because there's a little bit of like, it starts to feel a little monolithic in what that
was your feeling was kind of I watched the first episode, and it starts with them in the car road tripping. I immediately started going,
it was that intro's not good.
They're so aware of their personalities and what each of their brands are at this point that they are within seconds. And obviously that's the editing and the producing, but it feels like they're just trying to channel that, and it's lost any sense of like organically who they are or the organic playfulness that they may have. But as soon as they got to their subject's home, I was in. I was totally hooked. I was like, how are they going to make her up? What are they going to do with her? This is going to be great. And then the woman at the end stepped out of the car, and her husband was like, "You look like a movie star."
Her husband is so sweet.
Started crying. I was like, this is so. They just changed these people. It's so beautiful. But there is this sense with these guys though that their brands have gotten larger. Their individual brands have gotten kind of larger than the show can contain, and so it feels a little put on at times. And it's unfortunate because what was so wonderful about the show was that the way that it would catch you off guard, and it feels like even in ways it knows how to do that. And you're like, now I'm just waiting for the moment where you're going to make me cry, and you're really going to oversell this as much as possible.
You know, Jonathan once cut my hair, and it was like the best 45 minutes of my whole life. And he
did a good haircut.
I'm not going to say. It was a. I did walk out
Did Jonathan
better
give
than
you
I
a
loved.
shitty haircut?
No, it was good. It was good.
Betrayed.
No, it was good. And
It's like, yes, queen, you're done. Get out.
I was like, what is this? No, he was so sweet, and just like you'd think on the show. And there wasn't sort of an air of pretension or celebrity around him, which I actually thought to be really refreshing and charming. So
I don't think
he's my fave.
It may not. We're talking about their brands. It may not be their fault.
Yeah.
You know, it may not be that they're getting into the car and going, "You make sure you get me saying something like this." It may be the producers of the show who are like, you know, this is your brand. Make sure you say something like this and hit your marks. And so, you know, it might not be. They might not getting arrogant or anything at all. They might still be really nice guys. But the show just knows too well how to hit its beats.
I'm very in for your idea.
I think so. I think
What was your idea?
Switch them out.
Switch them
Oh,
out.
yeah.
Just start moving in new people. Like
They should
switch it around.
mentor.
They should mentor. There should be like a Fab Five Juniors.
I want to also see like a woman in there, a trans. Like it's better than the original cast in terms of diversity, but we can like move that ball a little bit more forward. And I think there was this initial charm to the first season because you're like, who are these guys? Oh, they're so great and so funny, and you know. And then I don't know, it's hard to replicate that. Yes. So I would love to see an infusion of sort of like new blood.
Yeah. You can watch them bonding with each other as the first season is happening in a sense, and it's like it's fun to watch them all discover each other as they're working with people and discovering things about them. That just adds more dynamics to it, more of a crescendo.
They're not discovering each other anymore. They're kind of just doing the thing
like,
that
you
they're
do your
supposed
thing.
to do.
Yeah.
All right. In the words of Triple Frontier, all right, bros.
Yeah.
What are your picks? I don't think they asked what are your picks, but they did say
They
bro
did
a
not.
lot.
In an act of queer solidarity, I will be choosing Queer Eye.
Ooh, you're choosing Queer Eye for the week over everything else.
Yes, although I do have this weird love for Triple Frontier, I think. But I just think, you know...
I want to put the
That's a crossover I want.
But I want to put the posters of Triple Frontier and Queer Eye next to each other.
Honestly, not that different. They're like standing in a line.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I personally would love home renovation advice from Ben Affleck. I feel like it would be fascinating. I think it would get me a tattoo. I'd be like, this is not about my home. And he'd be like, it's fine.
You think so? I feel like I would ask Ben Affleck for home renovation advice. Like, talk to Jen. Like, just like immediately like
talk to Jen.
Well, she would be
talk
great.
to Jen. Jackson, what's your pick? For the week?
My top pick is The Good Fight. It's so clever, and it has leveled up even further this season, and I just can't wait to watch more of it. I feel like I'm going to go back and watch the episodes again just because of the sense of how assured it is with what it's doing.
I'm going to say that this was a tough week, I thought, for a top pick. I thought, as in regards to television shows, it was a week of really great content that got put out into the world. Even the things that I complained about, with the exception of Triple Frontier, I really enjoy. But I'm going to pick Catastrophe because I thought it ended on such a beautiful note, even though I did not catch the ambiguity at all of the ending. And as a person in a long-term relationship, I relate to so much of what they talk about and how they talk about it and how the show finds love even in all of the messy fights that come with like long-term companionship. So I'm gonna go with Catastrophe. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That does it for us. Big thanks to Cole and Jackson. Please give them a round of applause. It's so nice of you. Thank you. We are going to be leaving you for 2 weeks, but before we do that, I want to remind those watching that too much of anything is bad, even watching us. So stop doing that. Do something else. I know you want to. I do. Bye.